Ukraine. What comes to mind when you think about Ukraine? The largest country in Europe by area, a major agricultural hub and grain export giant greatly contributing to the world's food security, largest IT outsourcing hub in Eastern Europe, home of the world's oldest democratic constitution of 1710, way ahead of the US Constitution. Unfortunately, probably not quite that. I asked a group of internationals, and one word was commonly mentioned: war. Since 2022, the whole world's attention has been drawn to Ukraine because of the largest and most devastating armed conflict in Europe since World War II, launched by the Russian Federation, which has caused catastrophic consequences in both Ukraine and the world. I'm Katerina Kirichenko from PLPG's legal team, and in this video I will discuss Russia's war in Ukraine, as well as complex accountability landscape for Russian atrocities. Let us first take a few minutes to look into the background of the Russian war in Ukraine. The Russian Federation's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine started back on the 20th February 2014, with the illegal occupation and subsequent annexation of Crimea, the autonomous republic within Ukraine. The aggression continued in the hybrid format. Since spring 2014, Russia has incited, supported, financed, and armed pro-Russian troops, separatists in the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast in the east of Ukraine, collectively known as Donbass. It led to the formation of self-proclaimed non-internationally recognized entities, so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, as well as prolonged heavy fighting between Ukrainian forces and Russia-backed armed separatists, which was known at the time as Ukraine's anti-terrorist operation to regain control of the territories. Russia's involvement in Donbass was characterized by a hybrid warfare approach, including disinformation, propaganda, covert military involvement, and support for separatist forces. Officially, Russia denied any military involvement, but was in fact sending troops, mercenaries, weapons, and equipment to the separatists. From 2015 until the beginning of 2022, the aggression largely settled into a somewhat frozen state, with sporadic skirmishes and fighting continuing in Donbass, but with no major advances by either side. On the 24th of February 2022, the aggression drastically escalated, when the Russian Federation launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, conducting mass missile and airstrikes across the whole country, accompanied by a multi-front ground assault of the official Russian armed forces. Moscow's apparent goal was a rapid offensive to seize Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, overthrow the Ukrainian government, and install a pro-Russian regime. However, Ukrainian forces, supported by local militias and civilians, mounted a strong defense, and by late March 2022 managed to repel the Russian troops from the capital region. This marked a significant turning point as Russia shifted its military focus to the east and south of Ukraine, aiming to consolidate control over territories there. By summer 2022, Russia had captured large parts of southern Ukraine and had illegally declared the annexation of 4 Ukrainian oblasts: Donetsk, Luhansk, and parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia oblasts, following widely condemned sham referendums. The war evolved into a protracted and grinding conflict, with continuous heavy fighting in the eastern and southern front lines of Ukraine. Russia has committed numerous serious human rights violations and atrocities on the Russian-occupied areas, and it continues widespread missile and drone strikes on Ukraine's entire territory, specifically targeting civilian objects, critical infrastructure, and energy facilities in an attempt to break Ukrainian morale. To this day, Russian military aggression continues. Yet Ukraine continues to resist. Large parts of territories have been liberated, and the war extended beyond Ukrainian borders into Russia's Kursk Oblast. What are the consequences of Russia's war in Ukraine? The war's toll on civilian lives, infrastructure, the economy, and natural environment has been truly catastrophic. Ukraine's population has declined by around a quarter. Tens of thousands of lives have been lost. About 7 million Ukrainians are displaced, and over 42,000 people are missing. As Prosecutor General of Ukraine stated, there is no war crime in history that was not and is not being committed by Russians on Ukrainian soil. Since the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion until November 2024, over 146,000 cases of war crimes have been registered by Ukrainian law enforcement. 20,000 children have been illegally deported and subjected to assimilation by the aggressor state. Ukraine's cultural heritage sites, including ones protected by UNESCO, have been destroyed and damaged. Objects of cultural heritage have been looted from the occupied territories and illegally transported abroad. Ukrainian nature has suffered unprecedented and long-lasting challenges because of the ongoing hostilities, with devastating consequences not only for the country, but also for the whole world. The Russian attack on Ukraine's Kakhovka Dam alone was the largest act of alleged ecocide in the world in the past 70 years. Ukraine has become the most mined country in the world, with the total area of mine-affected territories amounting to twice the size of Austria. Ukraine's economy and infrastructure has been disrupted. More than half of Ukraine's power generation capacities were either occupied by Russian forces, destroyed, or damaged. Poverty in Ukraine has increased by at least 1.8 million people since the start of the invasion. The cost of Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery is estimated at $486 billion over the next decade. Russia's war in Ukraine has had significant global implications, disrupting food supply chains and driving up global food insecurity and inflation, especially in low-income countries. It has caused energy market volatility, leading to higher prices. Additionally, the war has increased pressure on international aid systems due to rising displacement and humanitarian needs, ultimately hindering global economic growth. So, what about accountability for Russia's actions? As described, Russia's war in Ukraine has undoubtedly brought unprecedented and irreversible harm on many levels. The pursuit of justice and accountability for Russia's aggression in Ukraine has thus become a crucial priority, aiming to address the humanitarian toll and ensure lasting peace and stability. Due to the scale and complexity of Russia's crimes, as well as the need for expertise beyond domestic capabilities, the accountability landscape for Russia's war in Ukraine is highly complex, involving multiple layers of justice processes at international, regional, and national levels. Let us further dive into this topic to explore all the ongoing accountability initiatives to better understand the architecture of this complex accountability landscape. I will start with national-level efforts. Ukraine's domestic judicial system remains at the forefront of any accountability efforts, holding the main burden. 99% of all cases of war crimes committed against Ukrainians will be prosecuted by the Ukrainian judicial system, not by the international justice mechanisms. Ukraine's national-level efforts are being led by the Office of the Prosecutor General, which has initiated a vast number of investigations into war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other violations related to the ongoing war. As of September 2024, over 130 Russian soldiers have been sentenced in Ukrainian courts for the atrocities committed in Ukraine. Over 700 were notified of suspicion. Over 700 members of Russia's political and military leadership have been identified as suspects of launching and conducting the Russian aggression. Most of the proceedings are taking place in absentia, aiming to help the numerous victims of Russia's atrocities maintain faith in justice. This is quite a unique situation for the country at war. Ukraine has likely become the first in the world not only to document, but also to investigate, prosecute, and convict war crimes perpetrators during the very heat of the war. Undoubtedly, this remarkable efficiency would not have been possible without international support and cooperation. More than 27 countries are actively involved in investigating war crimes in Ukraine, either through their own inquiries or by collecting evidence of Russian crimes. Ukraine has signed numerous bilateral agreements to strengthen this cooperation, particularly with neighboring countries that have received many displaced Ukrainians, like Poland. Besides bilateral cooperation, Ukraine, being a party to the European Convention on Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters, has taken advantage of regional-level cooperation with European states and institutions. Eurojust, the European Union Agency for Criminal Justice Cooperation, and Europol, the European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation, have been key partners in facilitating regional-level cooperation. Eurojust has supported the establishment of a joint investigation team that coordinates legal actions and evidence sharing among Ukraine, several EU member states, the International Criminal Court, and Europol, including through the Core International Crimes Evidence Database. Europol enhances Ukraine's capabilities in addressing transnational crimes like arms smuggling, human trafficking, and cyber, providing critical intelligence for prosecuting offenders who operate beyond Ukrainian borders. Together, these efforts bolster coordinated regional investigative mechanisms. Additionally, one regional justice body, the European Court of Human Rights, or ECHR, has played a critical role in addressing human rights violations and war crimes related to Russia's actions in Ukraine, specifically in Crimea and Donbass since 2014. Ukraine has filed multiple interstate applications against Russia, focusing on violations of the right to life and prohibition of torture under the European Convention on Human Rights. Through these cases, Ukraine has emphasized the unlawful annexation of Crimea, Russia's role in supporting armed groups in eastern Ukraine, and the systemic violations committed in these territories, such as arbitrary detentions, enforced disappearances, and destruction of property. The ECHR's role extends beyond adjudicating these cases. It has issued provisional measures to protect civilians, calling on Russia to prevent harm. Additionally, besides addressing individual cases, the ECHR's decisions provide critical precedents for state responsibility in armed conflicts, as in the case concerning the downing of MH17 flight. The court's judgments create a legal record of violations and serve as a platform for Ukraine to hold Russia accountable under international human rights law. This contributes to Ukraine's broader strategy to hold the aggressor country accountable through various international legal avenues. I will turn to this now. Ukraine's collaboration with international criminal judicial institutions, such as the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, has played a critical role in addressing the committed Russian atrocities. Let us first start with the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, which plays an undoubtedly pivotal role in bringing high-level Russian perpetrators accountable for the atrocities in Ukraine, specifically for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Ukraine's engagement with the ICC dates back to 2014. While Ukraine signed the Rome Statute in the year 2000, the country did not ratify it until 2024. Yet, even prior to its ratification of the Rome Statute, Ukraine permitted the ICC's Office of the Prosecutor to conduct preliminary examinations into alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity linked to the annexation of Crimea and the conflict in eastern Ukraine by submitting two Article 12.3 declarations in 2014 and 2015. Following the full-scale Russian invasion on the 24th of February 2022, the ICC prosecutor formally launched an investigation into potential war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in Ukraine by submission of 39 ICC state parties. Since then, the ICC has been actively involved in gathering evidence on the ground, with the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan making several visits to Ukraine to assess the situation firsthand. In 2023, the ICC established a presence in Kiev, creating its largest field office outside The Hague. This office has been pivotal in coordinating with Ukrainian authorities, facilitating the safe collection of evidence, protecting witnesses, and ensuring the integrity of legal proceedings, while at the same time allowing the ICC to maintain a close connection to the ongoing investigations and to enable a more detailed and immediate response to new evidence of atrocities. Based on the discovered evidence, the ICC has issued arrest warrants against high-level Russian officials, the President, the Commissioner for Children's Rights, and senior military officials. Ukraine's engagement with the ICC has significantly evolved with Ukraine's ratification of the Rome Statute on the 21st of August 2024, which made the country a full member of the ICC and allowed the court automatic jurisdiction over crimes committed on Ukraine's territory. This huge development not only provides a direct path to justice for individual victims, but also bolsters Ukraine's broader efforts to seek accountability on international stage. Another international judicial body, the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ, serves as another critical venue for Ukraine's legal actions against Russia. Unlike the ICC, which prosecutes individuals for international atrocity crimes, the ICJ adjudicates disputes between states, focusing on violations of international law and state responsibility. In 2017, Ukraine filed a lawsuit to the ICJ under the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination to highlight Russia's support for armed groups in eastern Ukraine and the discrimination against Crimean Tatars and ethnic Ukrainians. Following the 2022 invasion, Ukraine filed another lawsuit under the Genocide Convention, challenging Russia's claims of genocide as a pretext for military actions. The ICJ issued provisional measures instructing Russia to cease military operations, reinforcing the court's role in mitigating conflict-related harm and protecting civilians. Although Russia has not complied with the court's instructions, the ICJ's rulings serve as the foundation for diplomatic efforts and help strengthen Ukraine's broader accountability strategy on the global stage. Together, the ICC and ICJ provide complementary avenues for justice, contributing to a comprehensive approach for complex Russian crimes. Yet, the existing justice landscape has one gap, which concerns accountability for the crime of aggression. Under the Rome Statute, the ICC cannot exercise jurisdiction over aggression when committed on the territory of or by nationals of a state non-party to the Rome Statute. It means that although the ICC is mandated to prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in Ukraine, it lacks jurisdiction over acts of aggression by Russia, which is not a state party to the Rome Statute. Given this jurisdictional limitation, the establishment of a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine has gained momentum. On the 21st of November 2022, the North Atlantic Treaties Organization's Parliamentary Assembly adopted a resolution urging members and partners of the North Atlantic Alliance to establish a special tribunal to prosecute the Russian leaders accountable for the crime of aggression. On the 23rd November 2022, the European Parliament adopted a resolution calling on the EU and its member states to support the establishment of a special tribunal. On the 19th January 2023, the European Parliament adopted yet another resolution in support of the establishment of the tribunal. Yet, establishing such a tribunal requires careful design to ensure adherence to international law standards, as well as the tribunal's legitimacy in the global community. Practical issues like jurisdiction, funding, logistical coordination, applicable legal frameworks, overcoming leaders' immunities, and managing proceedings and trials in absentia will need to be addressed. Despite these challenges, the creation of such a tribunal would represent a critical step towards comprehensive accountability for Russian aggression and upholding international law to complement existing legal mechanisms and eventually send a strong message against impunity. If you're interested to know more about the challenging on the establishment of a special tribunal for Russian aggression in Ukraine, I encourage you to watch a dedicated PLPG's quick guide video. You can also read PLPG's legal analysis on this topic. As we can see, the mentioned international justice processes intersect, creating a multifaceted approach to accountability for Russian crimes in Ukraine that encompasses both individual criminal responsibility and state liability. Yet, Ukraine's accountability landscape would not be complete without additional advisory and monitoring support from the international partners. The Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group, the United Nations, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and non-governmental organizations. Let me briefly talk about the mandate and functions of each of them. The Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group, or ACA, supports Ukraine's war crimes prosecutions by providing legal expertise and operational assistance. It was established in May 2022 through a partnership among the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom. It aids Ukraine in developing strategies for prosecuting high-level offenders, advises on evidence standards, and helps document and preserve critical evidence. The ICA also trains Ukrainian investigators and prosecutors, ensuring Ukraine's efforts meet international standards. The United Nations mechanisms, specifically the UN's Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine and the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry for Ukraine, have been critical in documenting human rights abuses, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission, established in 2014, has provided detailed accounts of abuses since the start of the aggression, while the UN Commission of Inquiry was established in March 2022 to strengthen response to the full-scale invasion and help identify facts and perpetrators for alleged war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other grave violations of international law. The findings of these UN bodies have been essential for informing both legal proceedings and broader international justice mechanisms. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, has played a monitoring role in Ukraine by observing and reporting on security conditions, documenting human rights violations, and providing independent analysis to contribute to the ongoing investigations. The OSCE's Special Monitoring Mission, active from 2014 to March 2022, documented violations in eastern Ukraine and Crimea. Its successor, the OSCE Moscow mechanism, continues to gather evidence and report on violations committed during the full-scale invasion. To fully understand the breadth of accountability efforts in Ukraine, it is important to recognize that various accountability mechanisms are not acting in isolation, but they are rather part of a broader ecosystem of investigative initiatives that rely on both domestic authorities and civil society organizations. Both international NGOs like Human Rights Watch, the International Federation for Human Rights, etc., and local NGOs such as Ukraine 5 AM and the Tribunal for Putin coalitions play an indispensable role in documentation efforts. Local Ukrainian organizations such as the Center for Civil Liberties, Civil Network Opora, and Truth Hounds have been vital in documenting war crimes and human rights abuses from the very beginning of the Russian invasion. The local NGOs' proximity to the events and understanding of the local context allows them to gather first-hand accounts from victims and witnesses, often in areas where international organizations cannot operate. The NGOs' reports serve as supplementary evidence for Ukrainian investigations and international court proceedings. PLPG has been providing capacity-building support to civil society actors to ensure their documentation efforts are conducted according to the highest international standards and best practices. For more details, we encourage you to see PLPG's thematic portal. Finally, besides the numerous elements of accountability for Russian crimes in Ukraine, there is an additional level to restoring justice. Civil responsibility of the aggressor state for all harm and damage caused by its aggression, which entails reparations. To address this level, an international initiative known as the International Compensation Mechanism is being established to address and compensate for the extensive material and personal losses inflicted on Ukrainian citizens as a result of Russian armed aggression. On the 16th of May 2023, the Council of Europe adopted a resolution establishing the register of damage caused by the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine as a first component of international compensation mechanism. This register serves as a record in documentary form of evidence and claims information on damage, loss, and injury caused since 24th of February 2022. Due to the unprecedented global support, the register started operating and accepting claims in April 2024. As next steps for international compensation mechanism, Ukraine is working with international partners to establish the compensation fund expected to be filled with the frozen assets of the Russian Federation and the compensation commission that will award payments to the victims. For additional information on Russian frozen assets, please see PLPG's legal analysis. This concludes the video on Russia's war in Ukraine and accountability for Russian crimes. I hope the video helped you better understand the background of Russia's war in Ukraine, as well as complex multi-level architecture of accountability initiatives for Russian crimes in Ukraine. Thank you for watching.